Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to a slightly delayed but very, very long episode of Dunswell Zoo. I hope you have all been well. I've been very busy. If you've been following me on Instagram, I have probably explained, and you'll have seen why I've been busy. I've been on some dates with a girl. Didn't really work out, but hey ho. And I also went to Yorkshire Wildlife Park. That went quite well. So we are, of course, now finally building the last habitat in the Australasia zone, and it is for the Australian sea lions. This is part one of two. It's a very big build, very intricate, very complicated. By far the most complicated build I have ever done in Planet Zoo to date. I suspect there will be some more coming in the future. But I wanted to finish on a nice big habitat. So this is the last thing you will see if you go through the entire Australasia section. Of course, if you enter via Africa, this isn't going to be the last thing you see. But it is a dead end. So if you come down here, you can't go through. Like with all the other habitats, you just sort of walk past them. Then you can get to your next destination. Whereas this one, you can't. It's a dead end. So it's nicer, I think, to have it as a sort of big statement piece because it's a dead end habitat. And a statement piece it most certainly is, because this habitat, when it's fully finished, will be able to comfortably house the maximum amount of Australian sea lions that you can have. And that is the plan, to have a breeding colony of Australian sea lions. And the reason why I chose Australian sea lions was because despite them being the most widely distributed pinnipeds in Australia, they're actually the least abundant. They're one of the most endangered sea lions pinnipeds in the world. There's only between, I think it's 10 and 20,000, something like that. Let me just check my notes. 10 and 12,000. 10 and 12,000. They mostly inhabit islands, but they do inhabit a few mainland sites as well. This sort of habitat is neither here nor there. It's not designed to look like an island, nor is it designed to look like the mainland. It's just designed to look like a bay, which is one of their preferred habitats. They like sort of sheltered bays and islands, that kind of thing. So the inspiration for this habitat really came from the Australian sea lion's natural habitat and the sea lion habitat called Point Lobos at Yorkshire Wildlife Park. Definitely this wall, what you can see being put in now, that's majorly inspired by Yorkshire Wildlife Park. Sort of like a gabion wall with a mesh, and then there's an electric fence which we put in as well, just to prevent people from reaching over and stuff like that. But yeah, this habitat was really complicated for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's so big. Number two, there's underwater viewing. Number three, Planet Zoo, despite its many, many wonderful features, is not the easiest game to build in when it comes to curves and things lining up properly. I find it quite difficult. It's a lot of fine tuning and tweaking and stuff like that. It's quite difficult. I find it difficult anyway. In the end, you won't see it this episode, but the habitat does come together and it looks amazing, if I may say so myself. It's one of my better achievements in Planet Zoo. Again, if I may say so myself. So I'm going for this natural path from Hexabit's Path mod. Really struggle to line everything up properly. Do manage to do it eventually though. So no worries there, but it takes up a long time. So I'll put some images up while I'm trying to figure this path out of the Point Lobos habitat at Yorkshire Wildlife Park, just so you can see where the similarities sort of come into play. Mainly it's this sort of gabion wall at the front, and then the offshore building and the nursery pool. Other than that, everything's sort of either inspired by the natural habitat, or it's just something I thought looked cool. Really struggling with this path here. I just couldn't find something that worked. The ramp was boring. I didn't like that. I wanted something more visually interesting. And you can see it's not working for me. So I get rid of it. Ay. And then just pull that out a little bit further, I think. And it doesn't make much difference. I still don't like it. So I attempt to fill that in and then decide, nah, you know what? I don't like it. But it's all trial and error, and that's why I keep it in, because these habitats don't come together overnight. Just this part 1, took what? 4-5 days, something like that. So it's not a simple task. But it's worth it in the end. I hope so anyway. So yeah, it's quite a long episode. That's why I split it into 2 parts, because I knew this was going to be a big build, and a big build it most certainly is. So I like the railing on this path, so I do decide to put it on all the elevated path pieces. Sort of like these wonky sticks. Just sort of taking stock of how things look, deciding what to do next. And I go for this. And it does turn out really well, if I may say so myself. I like how it looks anyway. Just trying to hide all the little bits of rock jut out. Get some nice textures going in there. We don't want everything to be smooth. Just hide all the gaps, basically. That one doesn't really work. So yeah, at the time of recording this, we're quite close to 200 subscribers. We're at 195. Hopefully we can reach 200. I would like to reach 200. I'd like to go beyond 200, in fact, but baby steps. And yeah, we'll just see how things go. Thank you to those that have been subscribed from day 1. Thank you to those of you who have subscribed recently. And thank you to everyone else. Just doing the same thing here, basically, with the rock work. I'm not going to recolour this rock work. I think it's a nice contrast between this and the gabion wall behind it. Well, my version of a gabion wall. It's actually the rustic European stone from the Europe pack, and of course the fur rocks from the aquatic pack. And then there's just some mesh pieces over that wall, just to give it a little bit of a gabion effect. I think this pause is where I was changing my music, because I build for a few hours at a time usually. I just like put music on in the background so I don't feel quite so alone. And sometimes I'm not feeling the music what comes on, so I change it, and that's what those pauses are. I try to edit most of them out, but some of them do escape me. Using the new creosote bushes, I absolutely love them. They of course arrived in the I think technically they arrived in the free update, but they go well with the Arid pack, which was the time that they arrived. So I will talk more about the Australian sea lions in a while. Just let me adjust my chair. But obviously, with it being a long episode and a two-parter, I don't want to cram everything in and then have nothing to talk about later on down the line. So we've used the Californian sea lion statue. You can't tell the difference when it's in concrete. So I wanted a craggy cliff backdrop for this habitat rather than sort of the stones that you can see in the background, the rocks. So I initially started using this, which is a blueprint, possibly by ZZ, I can't quite remember, and I decide that I don't like it. Get rid of it. And then I remember I downloaded these from the Steam Workshop, and I will put these in the description. So I don't recolor them, I don't really change the layout of them either. I think they work well enough as they are. However, I do sort of tweak a few little bits here and there. There are a lot of pieces here, I appreciate that, but it's so worth it for the end result. It looks like the image that I had in my mind. And we do break that monotony up with some planting. Because of course you would get some plants sort of hanging in there in the little cracks and crevices of the cliff. So I'm just checking their biomes. So it's aquatic and temperate. So initially I thought, oh, we can have some nice big trees in the backdrop. And I thought, well, it doesn't really fit with the theming, does it? It's sort of coastal. It's a bay. It'd be quite exposed to the elements. So really sort of tolerant trees, low shrubs, minimal planting, that sort of thing. Here I'm doing the side viewing, and I was going to go for a different fence sort of type. I was going to go for something with glass barriers so you could see the sea lions, like sort of ground level. But given the design of the pool, that didn't really work, so I just resort to this rustic stonework. Rustic stone wall, that's what it's called. Now, here's another thing that's inspired from Yorkshire Wildlife Park. So, the sea lions don't really like to go on rocks, they prefer beaches, sort of flat areas. They don't like stones and pebbles and things like that. So they actually line the outside of their habitat with like big stones and pebbles, so that the sea lions don't get too close to the guests, and it also is an additional stress barrier because the sea lions know that there's that distance between them and the guests. So again, doing the little Gabian feature. Changing music again. And we do have to remove a few panels of this a little later down the line, just because of what goes underneath the path, because of course there is underwater viewing. There's 2 levels of underwater viewing actually, but I don't want to blow my own trumpet. And then trying to find a trim for the top of the wall, sort of neatening these up as best as possible. And then I think I end up going for Australian planks. I was going to go for that stone, but it just jutted out a bit too much for my liking. So I go for, you can see it in the background there, I go for the Australian planks. I've put the electric fence in there as well. And now we're doing the sign. Again, very much inspired by Yorkshire Wildlife Park. The sign that goes overhead. Theirs says Point Lobos. Ours will say Tarcoola Bay. So Australian sea lions are found on the coast of sort of western and southern and southeastern Australia, and I believe it's on the west, sort of southwest coast of Australia. There's a place called Tarcoola, and there's a place called Tarcoola Bay. So Australian sea lions are present in Tarcoola, but they are not present in Tarcoola Bay. But the habitat is called Tarcoola Bay because it's a bay in Tarcoola. It is not Tarcoola Bay, if that makes sense. It's really odd. I liked the name Tarcoola Bay. And of course they are found in Tarcoola. They're just not found in the place that's called Tarcoola Bay, but they are found in bays in Tarcoola. It's an odd one, I know, but it is what it is. So just sort of going for really green, quite small plants here. It's things that the sea lions won't really interact with. I did put that ghost gum tree up there because I wanted like a focal point. I believe they're called weenies. Something to draw your eye. So in the distance, all you can see is a big tall tree. So, oh, what's over there? And then you go to it and realise it's actually Tarcoola Bay. It's also going to help for blocking out what's behind, which will be part of the African section. So here we're now building the offshore house. The sort of shape and the nursery pool, what joins onto it, are inspired by Yorkshire Wildlife Park, but the materials and the interior, I've never seen the interior of the sea lion house at Yorkshire Wildlife Park, and the materials are slightly different. I use this sort of horizontal plank, whereas it's like overlapped panelling in Yorkshire Wildlife Park. I'll put a picture on so you can see what I'm talking about. I could have done that if I wanted to, but it was just a bit too much effort, really. For already quite a detailed and big habitat, I didn't want to overdo it. Now, terrain was a big issue in this habitat, and it will continue to be an issue in the second part as well. So essentially what you can expect is the first part, so this episode, what you're watching now, is the outsides of the habitat, and the second part is the inside, if you like. So the lining of the pool, any planting, any enrichment, adding the sea lions, that's the second part. The walls, the underwater viewing, the fences, seating, paths, rock work, some of the rock work. That's this episode, so that's what you can expect. So I do go with a gate, because not to bang on about it, but that's what they have at Yorkshire Wildlife Park. And then I have ideas for what I'm going to put on one side of the path, so it's not a load of wasted space. And then I get rid of that path in there, because there's no need for it anymore. So this is just implied. That was odd. My shelves just cracked. That's really odd. Anyway, I hope it doesn't fall down. Yeah, because it's implied. Keeper access, it doesn't need to be as wide, so we give the sea lions a bit more room inside. Here I'm just doing the outline for the nursery pool, and then we go ahead and I change the music again, obviously, and we move the wall and I just fill those gaps in with the non-grid pieces. I could not get this to line up properly, so I do have to lower the terrain a little bit, which of course means we have to go back and adjust the terrain in the wallaby habitat because it pokes through the house. Ay. But yeah, the next episode will be part 2 of this build. and then the episode after that will be a tour of the Australasia section. It's going to be a mix of the sort of tours that I've usually done, so cinematic shots and things like that, no talking, but there's also going to be sort of talking in there as well. I'll be telling you about different iterations of the habitat, what it looked like in previous versions of Dunswell Zoo, just all the cool stuff like that, basically. But yeah, and then we'll move back to South America, and then we'll work on South America for a bit, and then we will begin working on our next zone, which I have more or less decided. I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up building Asia next, and we'll leave Africa for last. And I'm going to start with the Himalayas in Asia. We're going to do lots of sort of different planting, because a lot of Australia is quite dry planting, what we've been working with, sort of small plants as well. South America is very sort of tropical, with some temperate mixed in along the way. Whereas the Himalayas, we get to work with some alpine, some tundra, that kind of stuff. It's not something I've worked with yet in Dunswell Zoo, nor is it something I've worked with much at all in Planet Zoo, actually, now that I think about it. So that's probably what we'll move on to, maybe in like 10 episodes time. But I get ahead of myself, we're still here. So I've just put the habitat boundary in and deleting the old one. Adding one Australian sea lion just to see their navigable area, so they can access through the doors. So I go ahead and copy those doors over, which wasn't plain sailing. I had to select the little beams first, and then there we go. And then I go ahead and just fill that in like so. So it's more or less equal. In my initial sketches there was 8 individual offshore compartments, but just given the size of the sea lions and how much room the doors take up for them to navigate through, we end up going for 4 instead of 8. Which isn't a big issue, really, to be fair. Some implied keeper access here. This fence is a blueprint. I can't remember what set it is from. And there's the matching gate as well. I think it's the wooden fences and wooden gates set from... I can't remember who it's from now, actually. I was going to say Mizaki, I think their name is, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll find it and put it in the description. It's a really nice fence. They have a good selection there. And personally, I don't have anything against using blueprints. I think they can really enhance a build, you know, why reinvent the wheel? So that's that. And then we dig out the pool there. I haven't included the gates in the grouping for the fence, because we may decide to open the gates at some point. For now it's just closed, just because ease of access. And now we're getting on to the nightmare, which is pool lining. I find lining a pool in Planet Zoo really difficult. I've watched a few tutorials about it, and I just can't get the hang of it, which is not good considering this one has not 1 but 2 pools. I genuinely just find it really difficult. I struggled a lot with this. think I ended up removing this at some point and then starting again. I'm sure I did. I got quite frustrated with it, I'm not gonna lie. So we have our first male, of course. We've moved him offshore. He's called Harry. And then I'm thinking, because we're going to have quite a lot of Australian sea lions, we'll name the first 3, I think. We'll name the first 3 pups after some of you subscribers. So I'm thinking probably Norman after Andrew Norman, wildlife photography. Aubrey after Aubrey Chaston, and either Sam or Edward after Samuel Edwards. Those are sort of my 3 main interactors across YouTube and Instagram. And then the rest of the pups, or some of the adults, we'll probably name after Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts characters, I think. You know, we're starting off with a Harry for a male, so maybe a Hermione, a Ginny, a Minerva, Sirius, things like that. I think that would work quite well. Similar to how our guanacos are all named after sort of old ladies. You know, you've got Ethel and Doris and things like that. Yeah, that's just what I'm thinking. So I finally got some sort of structure in that looks a bit like a lined pool. Yeah, I wouldn't advise it. I really wouldn't. If you can build a lined pool, you have a gift, because it stressed me out. And this is only the small one. The bigger one's like, what, 4 or 5 times the size of this. It's deeper, it's a different shape. Just, eesh. I do go for a flat bottom, just for easiness, you know, you put the drains in. And because this just looks scruffy, the terrain sort of poking out, I put some fur rocks on the end, and it sort of serves as a double purpose. It's to hide the sort of scruffiness, but it also gives the juvenile sea lions a little bit of privacy in the nursery pool. It blocks the line of sight a little bit with the guests, which, to be fair, the guests are a fair distance away from the nursery pool. They can see, technically, but I don't think it would be enough to cause them any stress. But just in case, you know, we've got that block in the line of sight. And then on the back here, I decided to put more fur rocks in, because you can never have enough fur rocks, and I think we should have some more fur rocks in the game, personally. The ones we've got are nice, but they do get old real quick. We need some different shapes and different patterns and stuff like that. So just go ahead and blend this in as best as possible, and then just put some more fur rocks at the back there. I'll probably put a pipe or something in at some point as well, for a little bit of realism. So it looks like there's fresh water being pumped in. I do change the colour of this, I don't like it in the end. And then we just add a few of those pebbly fur rocks, mainly just for texture, to be honest. Just something nicer than a flat sandy plateau. Plants, we go for some quite small plants in here because it's a small area to work with. And you don't want to crowd it out too much. Just sort of make it look natural. There we go, I change it. I make it a bit darker. Right. Underwater viewing. Here's where the nightmare continues. So the actual underwater viewing section itself is fine. It was getting the path to go down and getting the path in where it would work with being sort of underwater. That was the difficult bit. I managed to achieve it, thankfully, but yeah, it was tricky. So my goal was to try and get the path to sit on top. So what I ended up doing is raising it up a bit and then putting the path in and then sinking it back down. Like so. And then just copy this down. Decided to go for a little bit of a shallower thing at the top. I think 4 was a bit too much. And we'll go for 4 at the bottom. Just because we're going to have some terrain underneath it. Because we're building underground, it doesn't like it. Just bring that terrain up and then attempt to get it to sit flush. You can see there's a lot of fine tuning going on here. Despite, let's say, completing the underwater viewing areas in this episode, they're not done. They still need decorating. I'm not 100% sure how I want to decorate them, just that I want to decorate them. I'm thinking make it a little bit like a cave with some sea lion sculptures and things like that. Nothing particularly overt. Big glass viewing window. Offers lots of viewing for the sea lions. Carving out the big pool. I told you it's like 4 or 5 times the size. And then just smoothing it out a bit. So it's not quite as harsh. Just checking the view out and that's fine. Connect the path up. And then it's this path down here and then the path what leads back upstairs. That's the ones I struggled with. So this one was a lot of terrain fine tuning. I could see it wasn't sitting flush. I have to get a different piece out and then align it to that, and it's still not sitting quite flush, so I put it down anyway and then raise the floor up. And then I think about putting a cover over it. I think I do put a cover over it actually. I go for the limestone again. Yeah, I was going to go for this wood, but I don't know, it just didn't suit the environment. Yeah, just lift the limestone floor up. And then move it down again. Just so it covers the path. And then this nightmare begins. So much like lined pools, I find staircase is quite difficult to build in Planet Zoo. I can't, because I do change the design completely. I was going to edit these stairs to make them like half ramp, half staircase, but I abandoned that in favour of something that's easier to work with if it's slightly more complicated for the guests to navigate. Just putting a planter in here, just something nice to change things up a little bit. So let's talk about the Australian sea lion then. So it's found in Australia, unsurprisingly, and is one of the most endangered pinnipeds in the world. Between 10 to 12,000 Australian sea lions. The species does mostly inhabit islands, but does inhabit a few mainland sites. The principal breeding colonies are located at Kangaroo Island and Dangerous Reef in South Australia. Individuals have been found as far south. It's been sighted as far as New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, and Shark Bay in Western Australia. And surprisingly, the Australian sea lion is the most widely distributed but the least abundant pinniped in Australia. The species is listed as endangered under South Australian legislation. It's received full legal protection and has a special protected species status, listing it as rare. Evidence suggests that the Australian sea lion population may be declining. Calls are being made for more intensive research into the species. There's been a particularly alarming dramatic fluctuation in the mortality rate of pups. So during 1999, the mortality rate was 41%, which is more or less nearly half. Half of all pups weren't surviving. The highest cause of mortality at Dangerous Reef was infanticide by aggressive adults. Food shortages have also been listed as a very likely possibility too. So their presence in the zoo, in Dunswell Zoo, is particularly important because there needs to be a population within captivity, and the only ones I'm aware of are in Taronga, in Taronga Zoo in Sydney. Australian sea lions breed on sandy beaches, mainly on offshore islands. They have a long breeding season. Males don't form harems. They do, however, protect particular females and will breed with them later. The prey of Australian sea lions isn't particularly well documented either. Typically, it's perceived that they go for fish, squid, crustaceans, things like that. Octopus is another one. There is some suggestions that they may occasionally take penguins as well. I've never seen any evidence of that. I wouldn't put it past them, though, to be quite honest with you. There are loose associations within a breeding colony. They can breed... How can I word this? They don't breed whenever, but they're not restricted to the same birth window each time. So they can be born any point from January to June with a gestation period of 12 months. Despite that, females only give birth to one young and usually don't breed again for 2 to 3 years. So that's why we've got we'll be having a lot of Australian sea lions in the habitat. Of course, Australian sea lions, you can tell the difference between them and Californian sea lions, for example. Australian sea lions are more sandy coloured and a little bit smaller. There is, of course, sexual dimorphism between the males and the females, as is common in most species, So this seating stand here is from the workshop. I'm just putting the seating in myself, and I've added an extra seating arrangement, if you like. I'll put that in the description as well. I was going to change the roof, but I just decided to leave it as it was. Let me go ahead and add this little wall in. And just extend this. I think I extend it round the corner as well. Just not round the front. Yeah, so it goes round the corner. It just doesn't go around the front. Because the idea of that little lip is when education talks are taking place, food can be thrown on that lip, and then the sea lions will sit and eat on that little lip. What's just there? Some curbing. Haven't shown you this for a while, have I? Custom curbs, of course, using the plaster panels. Just to make it look nice. I was going to put a fence in, and I might still do that, but I'm not 100% sure. As of the time of recording this, I haven't actually finished the second part yet. So we'll see how things come together, but it does look amazing so far, if I may say so myself, because it looks completely different to how this episode finishes. I'll say that much. This episode sort of finishes where it doesn't look like much has happened, but just the first sort of couple of segments in the next episode, definitely there's a massive change in how the habitat looks and how the habitat feels. I don't know if any of you get this when you play in Planet Zoo, but habitats give off a certain feel when you look at them and you're seeing the animals interact within their habitat. They have a certain feel, and I like the feel that this habitat has. So we are now approaching the end of the episode, finally. There's about 3 minutes left. So I shall leave you with this planting. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to. It'd be greatly appreciated. It really helped me out and helps the channel grow. We're so close to 200 subscribers as well. It'd be really nice to get to 200 before the next DLC. I shall see you all in the next episode, which is the final part of this build. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at JW_YT. And until then, my friends, stay safe, stay kind, and I shall see you all in that next episode. Bye-bye for now, and enjoy.